Ready?
Baruchim Aboyim B'Shem Irgin Shir Torah. We would like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Zev Smith Shlita and challenging Eruv Chatzeros questions. I'd like to give a big yeshikach to Rabbi Simcha Cohen for his support for today's shir. Lili Nishmas Oviv, and Nishmas Yitzura B'Sorah Chaim. And now Rabbi Smith Shlita.
Someone asked me recently, he made an Eruv Chatzeros in his apartment building. He was a young man who just got married. And he was told afterwards there might be a problem because there are some non-Jewish tenants in the building. So I was thinking, as he told me, that it's not a problem, it's a Mishnah, it's a Gemara, it's a Siman and Shulchan Aruch. The problem is that we don't know the halachas. And indeed, this question of a situation that you have to make an Eruv Chatzeros, whether it's a apartment building or a three-family house, a bungalow colony, we'll soon see, when there's a non-Jewish person living there, is a sugya for itself. And the truth is, we heard the shayla from a different angle. There are people that need help, constant help, whether it's an elderly person, a sick person. So you have a live-in maid or a home attendant, a non-Jewish person living in a Yiddish home. And the question is, as far as carrying in the home, since you have someone else living in the house. I just heard the shayla, it was a very hamish bungalow colony. I got over 100 families, and they made an Eruv Chatzeros, and they made the Tzuras HaPesach, and on Shabbos someone pointed out that there was a non-Jew, actually the owner, the original owner was living on the premises. He had a bungalow, and someone said that the Eruv is no good because you did include the non-Jewish owner of the bungalow colony. We heard a shayla, someone ended up in China for Shabbos, and he was in a Goyish hotel. What is that lach? Is that a carry? Can it make an Eruv Chatzeros? So as we'll see, today's sugya is making an Eruv Chatzeros, that when there is a non-Jewish person on the premises. Nebuch, I should just say, L'tzareinu hagadol, the same shayla is negay when you have a friar person. The Shulchan Aruch and Shin Pei Hei Siv Gimel says when you have a mummer, someone that is not living like a Yid in a very severe way, and of course you have to know when is someone's a mummer, but there's no doubt about it, a mummer has the same halacha like a guy. So unfortunately, we have to say that when you have a irreligious person, it's the same shayla, the same sugya. So today we're talking about a guy, but the same is true regarding a friar person. And the question is very simple. Let's say you're making an Eruv Chatzeros in an apartment building that has 50 families, or you're making in a 3-family house, and one of the tenants happens to be non-Jewish. Is there any problem with that? L'chayr, we could argue, what's the problem? The non-Jew is not mechuyev to keep Shabbos, doesn't have to be part of the Eruv. So dude, make the Eruv the way you like and just ignore the non-Jew. Or maybe we'll say that he's living there, and since he's not part of Hilchas Eruvin, maybe he could only disturb the Eruv and can't be part of it. Now, l'chayr, you'll say, why should that be so? If the guy has to be part of the Eruv, so let him be part of the Eruv. And the truth is, I should mention that when you make an Eruv Chatzeros, each person contributes a groigeris, which is less than a kazayis. So half a matzah per person, and you're good to go, like they say. Let's say you have a big oilam, you have a bungalow colony, you have an apartment building with 100 families. So the halacha is, you don't need more, maximum, than 18 groigeris. That's the maximum, even for hundreds or thousands of people. And you have a big community, Eruv, 18 groigeris is the maximum. It happens to be that a 16-ounce box of matzah, in other words, a pound of matzah, has the required 18 groigeris. So you're wondering, listen, if the guy doesn't have to be part of the Eruv, so fine, it's good the way it is. If you tell me he has to be part of the Eruv, good. I'll take a box of matzah, I'll include hundreds of others, and include the guy. But both of these assumptions don't seem to be correct, because we have a Mishnah in Eruv and Samach Aleph Mebeis, Hadorim Akum B'chotza Echad, or Misha Einei Moide Be'eruv. We're talking about either a Goyish person or a Friar person. Hareza Oisa Olav. Zok the Mishnah, the guy has to be part of the Eruv, but can't be included in the Eruv. Then the Mishnah quotes a Shita of Rabbi Yakov. If you have a two-family house, one Goyish family and one Yiddish family, there's no problem. But once you have two or more Yidden living together with the guy, then you have a double problem. The guy has to be part of the Eruv, but he can't be part of the Eruv. Now I'll explain that in a moment. But frag the Gemara, listen, if the guy has to be part of the Eruv, why is there a difference, one or two? So the Gemara basically explains that really a guy is not part of Hilchas Eruvin. A guy could be living in your apartment building and doesn't have to be part of the Eruv. He doesn't keep Shabbos, he doesn't wear tefillin, he's not part of Hilchas Eruvin. Nothing against him, he's just not part of our mitzvah Eruv. But Chazal wanted that we should not live together with the non-Jews. We have our culture, they have theirs. So Chazal said you have to make an Eruv, but he can't be part of your Eruv. So therefore you'll say, wow, this is difficult. So I'll live only with Yidden. And the Goyim will live with themselves, we'll live ourselves, and Shalom al Yisrael. Frag the Gemara, so 1 second. If that's the case, that a Goy has to be part of the Eruv, so why one family is different? Why you have a two-family house, one Yid, one Goy, there's no problem. Zog the Gemara, because that's lo shchiach. To have just one family with a Yid and a Goy, that's not shchiach. But once you have two or more Yiddish families, we have this unique problem, that the guy has to be somehow part of the heta, but he can't be included in the Eruv. You could have a baksa matzah today till tomorrow. The guy is not part of that baksa matzahs. So, what then is the Eitzah? We'll soon see. You have to be soich his rishus, you have to get part of his rishus. But what we do see in response to our question is that really a guy Mi'ikadidin doesn't have to be part of the Eruv. You can have an apartment building and ignore him. But Midrabanan, if you have a number of Yiddish families with a guy, we say the guy has to be somehow included in the Eruv. If you want to see this very clearly, the Torah in the beginning of our Simon Shin Pei Beis says, Mamish this Yisoid, that Mi'ikadidin, a guy is not on the map in Hilchas Eruvin. Midrabanan, you have to have him part of it. If there's two or more families, we'll soon see the exact procedure. And this indeed is our simon for today. Simon Shin, Pei Bei, Sif Aleph. The guy has to be somehow part of the Eruv. Now to apply this more specifically, let's go in order with different groups of questions. We'll start with the simple shaila, that let's say you have a two-family house. Upstairs lives a Yid, downstairs lives a guy, or vice versa. So mi'ikididin, you don't need anything. The Yid could carry in his house, in his backyard. The guy, you don't have to make an Eruv. This is our Mishnah. One Yid and one guy is no problem. Of course, the Yid should make sure that he doesn't learn from the Darchei Akum, but that's basically enough. If you have a three-family house, two Yidden and one guy, then we have this issue of being Soicha Rishus. We'll soon outline in a moment. But first I want to show cases that are not Negeya. Question. A Yid lives next door to a guy, and they have a common yard, and the Yiddish boys are playing ball on Shabbos. The ball went into the guy's yard. Can the Yid walk into the backyard of the guy, take the ball, and walk back to their house? The answer is yes, because this is basically two families that are connected, one Yid, one guy, that's all it is. Yid's living alone, guy's living alone, and basically, when you have a Yid and a guy, and that's it, you don't need an Eruv. So as long as the entire chutz is enclosed, you could carry the ball back. Interesting question, and this is becoming more common when you have a live-in, whether it's a nurse for an older person, a sick child, or it's a live-in maid, and the question is, they are given their own room, or sometimes they're given their own basement, their own apartment. Does that require them to be part of the Eruv Chatzeros? Now you have a Yid and a guy living in one location. So the answer is, if it's a one-family house, the Yid living and the guy has their own basement even, there's no chiyuv of Eruv Chatzeros. Because this is one family Yiddish and one Goyish, there's no chiyuv Eruv Chatzeros. The question is, if you have a two-family house, two or more family house, so now you have two Yidden and one Goyim. Says the Pri Megadim in Sif Cotton Bays, Yisrael sheyesh loim b'shareis akum, yesh loim b'da'asa. Now you have a scenario of two Yiddish families, you need an Eruv Chatzeros. The chiddush in this is that when you have a guy that's renting, schiris, kanya, so he's part of the equation, he's part of the big picture. But if you give the Goyish worker a room, but it's not theirs, because when Yom Tov comes, you move them to a different place, that you need the room for your children. If you could move them around and they're not paying rent and they don't have any rights to this specific room, so they're not like a soicha. They don't have really part of the house. Additionally, even if they have their own room, but if they eat from one kitchen, if it's pita echad, if it's considered really one kitchen that's feeding all of the people, it's like a guest in your home. And I saw the Marsham and Chelik Vav, Simon Yudzayin, asks this on the Pri Megadim. He says, why is the Pri Megadim mechayiv an Eruv? L'chayra, it's not a regular rental that requires an Eruv. So the Rebbe says it's not such a big kasha. It could be the Pri Megadim was talking about a scenario that the guy had its own room that can't be moved and his own food. But we could say, in response to our original question, if you have a guy, a full-time living guy that's living in the house, usually an Eruv is not required. If it's a one-family house, certainly not. If it's a two-family house and there's two Yidden, and the guy has his own basement that's theirs and their own food, then you should focus on making a proper Eruv. The question that we began with someone here from the Shia Grad that said he ended up in China for Shabbos. He wanted to carry in the hotel. Do you have to make an Eruv Chatzeros? Try making an Eruv in a Chinese hotel. You don't know where to begin. So if he's certain he's the only Yid there for Shabbos, believe it or not, he's allowed to carry in the hotel. But it becomes a question when Shabbos morning he bumps into another Yid from Borough Park and he says, very unhappy to see you. Because he really is unhappy to see the other Yid, because now he has two Yidden, and he has to really stop carrying, because now we have two Yidden with Goyim, and then an Eruv really was required all along. We'll soon see that there is an Eitzah on Shabbos, but again, if you know certainly that he's the only Yid on the premises, there is no Chiyav Eruv. The question that we began with the bungalow colony, which was again, they made a beautiful Eruv Tzuras HaPesach, Eruv Chatzeros, and it was an oversight. They forgot that there was a non-Jew living on the premises. So the truth is that Eruv at this point is not good. Because since there's many families with a guy, they needed to include the guy. We'll soon see the Eitzah is Schiris even on Shabbos, but that was a problem. Hopefully they should have solved it on Shabbos. We had a question, before Shabbos, but on Shabbos also was an Eitzah. We had a question, there was a different bungalow colony Shaila, but this is the Messias, that a guy from outside rented the store and ran the store, the local bungalow colony store. So the guy was working, I think, 5 days a week, from 9 to 3 or 9 to 5, whatever it is. And the guy had exclusive rights to this store in the bungalow colony. Does that require more than just an Eruv Chatzeros with the families? Because now you have a guy on the premises. And he was paying rent, and it was his exclusively. So there is one redeeming factor, that the guy doesn't really live there, and his makam pita, his source of food, is not in the store. Now, even though if he's there a whole day, he has to eat lunch or supper, whatever it is, but that's not his makam pita. He's not living there. And this goes back to one of the Gedolei Rishonim, the Tashbetz and Chelik Beis, Simon Lamed Vav, and then Mr. Rajman and the Rosh and Tshuva say the same thing, but the Tashbetz spells it out. He has Kamat this Shaila. He has about a Goyish baker that rents a bakery. He says, Poshet, if that baker has his own home, even though he eats by day in his bakery, but that's not Makam Pita, and therefore he does not fit into this big picture. He's not really considered a dweller in this regard. He has a bakery, he's there for a good part of the day, but he doesn't sleep there, he doesn't eat his regular meals there. The fact that he eats lunch and supper when necessary does not make it Makam Pita. So basically, l'halach, he's not on the Hilchos Eruv Chatzeros map. Interesting question. Now I guess we could understand why he's not a Shaila, but for those that go away for Pesach, or they sell their house for Pesach, they're selling their house to a guy. Now, assuming you're living in an apartment building, so now all of a sudden the guy owns or renting this house. Does that require a new Eruv Chatzeros? Because now we have a new guy that has a house. Either he bought it or rented it for Pesach. The answer, I hope, is Pashit. The guy, even if he bought it, and even if he or rented it, and even if he did it lahalacha, but he's not living there, it's a lot less than Makam Pita. It's mamish not his place, and the guy will not eat bread in your house over Pesach. You could be certain. Now, even though he has rights and he has legal rights, but he's not living there. He could do it, but he's not living there. If he's not living there, it again is not part of the question of Eruv Chatzeros. I just heard this shaila, and it's kedai to mention it because it brings out the point. There was a number of houses in Kensington, that's where the story was. A few houses, one next to the other, and the backyards were pretty much connected. So a number of the Yiddish families made a big Eruv Chatzeros that connect, let's say, 4 or 5 homes, so the children could go from one to the other through the backyard and play. The 6th home was a Yid that owned the house, and he had a Goyish tenant. And that wasn't part of this big Eruv Chatzeros. Recently, they wanted to include him into the Eruv Chatzeros. So it came out an interesting thing. All the years that the Yid lived with the Goyish tenant, you don't need any Eruv at all. It's just one and one. There's no Chiv Eruv. Now, all of a sudden, they wanted to include it in the bigger Eruv. Now, Taka, the guy has to be reckoned with. Because now he's part of the bigger picture. Now, there's a few Yidden and him. So you would have to come on to what we said, the Schiras Rishus, as we'll soon see. But the point is, you have to just know the basics. The step 1, part 1 is when there's a 1 Yid and 1 guy, nothing is required. Because mi'ikad din again, a guy is not in the equation as far as Hilchas Eruv. Part 2, which is of course a lot more challenging, is when you have more than one Yiddish family. You have an apartment building, again, the Ungalite that are living in Flatbush have the Shiloh all the time, whether it's non-Jews or Freie Yidden, a bungalow colony. Basically, what is the Eitzah when you have a non-Jew or Freie person in this area, and you have the halacha that he has to be part of the Eruv, but he's not part of the Eruv. So this is our Mishnah, and we'll soon see the details. You have to make Schiras Rishus, you have to get Rishus for his property, and then he is sort of part of the Eruv. But before we get to the Eitzes, maybe today, Bizman Hazeh, maybe we don't really need an Eitzah. And here is the following suggestion that has a source in Rishonim. Maybe the whole din that a guy has to be included in the Eruv was in those days that basically Eden lived in their own little shtetlach or ghettos. It was exclusively Yidden. Then, in the rare scenario that you had a Yid with a guy, Chazal frowned upon that and wanted to make sure it doesn't happen. So they made it difficult that you have to make an Eruv, but he's not part of the Eruv. In other words, when it was not typical to have a Yid and a guy living together, then we had to find eitzes to try to prevent that relationship. But Bizman Hazeh, even in Borough and Flatbush and in all over, there are Yidden and Goyim that are living peacefully. So what are you going to say? Eruv doesn't work, we don't want you to live together. But we're living together. It's a done deal. It's happening. So why should this monkey wrench be necessary? Today it's done anyhow. So in other words, when was really Mikradin, a guy is not part of the Eruv at all. We just want to discourage living together. But today that it's happening and we are living together, maybe you don't have this monkey wrench that really makes a problem, because today it's being done whether we like it or not. You'll say, me some chalish, who gives you the right to start saying this no longer applies and this is different? So there is a precedent that we see things might have changed. The halacha is, it's a pasuk in the Torah, that a Yid is allowed to lend money to a guy beribis. But midirabanan, this is Gemara in Bava Metzia, Daf Ayin Aleph, Shem Yilmaid Mimaisav, we don't want Yidden to be dealing with Goyim for longer periods of time, and you get involved with business and money lending, so you're not allowed to lend to a guy beribis. So Taisus in Bava Metzia, Daf Ayin Amid Beis, that on the Shruyim Bein HaUmas, today, Taisus saying in his times that anyhow we're living with Goyim, we're doing business with Goyim day and night, there's no longer that concern, because already it's happening anyhow. And you go back to the Ikad Adin, you're allowed to lend money to a Goy Beribis. And that's Taki Gepaskin, Yeridea Simen Reish, Kuf Nun Tes. So we see such a approach. Miyakidadin, we shouldn't do it, but today that it's done, so we go back to original halacha. But the emes is fakert. The fact is that Tosfos Lamaisa says it regarding Ribbis that today is different. And it makes no mention of this regarding Hilchas Eruvin. Maybe for some reason there's a chiluk between Eruvin and Ribbis. But what should be the chiluk? So I want to mention the Ginas V'Radim in Chayla Gimel Siman Chav Beis, Diva Maschal Ugedoyle Mizu. He Taka says this Lamaisa. He says that there is a tzad to be made when you have a goyish tenant, that since today, anyhow, he says, Halavai Nasik Panasasenu, we should have Panasa, we can't live alone. So the Ginas V'Radim already mentions a tzad to be made Bizman Hazeh. The Marsham and Chaylekesim Alamadala quotes a Basamim Rush. Basamim Rush is questionable who wrote it. Is it the Rush? The Chasam Sofer called it the Kizvei HaRush. It's not the Rush. Okay, he quotes it B'Shem the Marachar Zerua. But the Marsham quotes the Basamim Rush that B'Shas Hadchak Nahagu Lahakul with this svara. But as I said, Be'emes is Punkt Fakert. Tosfos says a kul Lagabi Ribbis, not Lagabi Eruvin. What's the pshat? It's very pashut. Business doesn't foster a real relationship. If you're going to lend money to a guy, you become a business acquaintance, sometimes a competitor. And the Metzias is Kol Echad Sayin B'nei Nasei. So dealing in business, especially taking someone else's money, doesn't make a friendly relationship. So we could say today, don't worry about it. But living in the same house with non-Jews, that's what Chazal were concerned about. So even if we're maker by Ribbis, who said you could apply that to Hilchas Eruvin? And that's why the Poskim reject this svara. The Chasam Sofer and Siman Tzadik Beis says, B'chlal, tzarech minyan achal atira. You have to be on the same status to revoke a takanas Chazal. But I did see the Beis Meya in Shin Pei Beis, Sif Chaf. He says, if you have no other choice, there is a tzad to be soymech on this svar. Rav Vozna, in grad of 3 Tshuvas, Dalet Mem Beis, Vav Mem Zayin, and Ches, the end of Tzadik Zayin, in his Lashon, the last Tshuva, L'snif Ba'alma, Kedayim, Go'oinim, Amitim, Elu. You could falazich that if you have other snifim lahakal, that if you have a guy that doesn't want to cooperate and you can't find a better eitzah, perhaps today is different. Even though, as I said, the Chasam Sofer holds you have to have a minyan nacham. Amshleim Beklugim Bacharta B'chayim says Chasmi in Kuf Chavav Chasmi Lahaski Loi Mekain. So I can't say it's pashit, but as another sniff, perhaps this svara would work. One thing I will mention, I saw the Nachlas Tzvi and Yeredei Yasim in Takin Kuf Nun Tes. He says that we find regarding Ribbis that a Talmud Chacham is allowed to lend to a guy b'Ribbis. Can we say that at least Talmud Chacham is allowed to live with a guy? So the Nachlas Tzvi, a very similar svara. He says, L'maisa Talmud Chacham, if he lends with guy Ribbis or not, he's not going to have a friend, not going to get learned Mimaisav. But if a Talmud Chacham is living with a guy day in, day out, that's the Cheshash Chazal we're concerned about. Shema Yilmad Mimaisav. So now we see basically, we're back to our Mishnah, that if you have Yidden and one guy, or Yidden and more than one guy, certainly you have to find an Eitzah. What is the Eitzah? For example, you have an apartment building that has some Goyim, some Fraya people. What is the Eitzah? To make a baksa matzah for all Yidden in a bungalow colony is fine. But once you have one guy or more, or one Fraya or more, then we have a problem. So as we mentioned, the Gemara says you have to be soicher rishus. Now what that means very basically is you give the guy a token payment, we'll soon see even less than a Shabbat and you rent his rights to his apartment. Now his apartment becomes mine as well. The Rambam in Eruvin Beis Yud, Oz Yasa Akam Kilu Oireyach Imohem. It's as if now I have the bailus and the guy is living by me. Now, in other words, what basically the problem was that there was a non-Jewish person living on the premises. Now you made a token schirus. It's like it's your house as well. The Goyen Yaakov in Eruvin Samach Beis adds that really there's nothing wrong with having a guy there. But Shema Yelmad Mimaisav. So therefore, try to find a different place to live. But Lamaisa, you can't find a different place to live. So now you have no choice. Then you go back to Yikadadin. Just any little token schiras is good enough. Now, Lamaisa, the Gemara calls it, this is an Eruv Samach Bey, I think the most important two words for today. This schiras is a schiras re'ua. It's a very inferior schiras. Why is that? We'll soon see. Because you don't need almost anything to make the schiras. The Gemara says beferish, even less than a Shabbat Pruta works. You could even do it on Shabbos when you can't make a kinyan. You don't need a star. This schiras, as the Rambam puts it, in Perik Beis, Halacha Yud Beis, a little later in the other Halacha I mentioned, Shaschiras kebitul rishchus, she'ene secheres vaday, ela hekebel vad. Again, it's basically a symbolic token that the guy is giving you rights to his house. So when did Chazal make a Gzeira D'Rabbanan that a guy we have to find an Eitzah? When it's his house. When you have a chelik of it, when he's Mavatlas Rishus to you, you basically avoided the problem that Chazal were concerned about. But again, the main yisoid is, it's really mikidin, you don't need anything. It's Gzeira D'Rabbanan, so with a minimal schiras re'uya, that's enough. The Shulchan Aruch and Shin Pei Beis, Siv Dalet says you could even do it on Shabbos. We'll soon see how. But again, you're not being kind of the guy's house. When people approach the guy, can I buy your house? I'll give you less than a penny. Disrespectful, and it's wrong. You're not buying his house. It's basically a bittul rishus. The Gemara in Erev of Samach Bey that I mentioned earlier, Shin Pei Beis, hey, that you could even give him less than a Shabbat Pruta. There's no kinyan in this world that works with less than Shabbat Pruta. It's not a kinyan. The Ramah says, and also Sifei, you could even do it on Shabbos. And I'll give you a good example. The Bangal Conley story that we mentioned, they made a beautiful Tzuras HaPesach, they made a beautiful Eruv Chatzeros, but they forgot the Goyish Balabas, go over to him on Shabbos, and basically say, can we rent your Rishus right now? You can't give him money, says the Mishnah Berurah, because money is muktzah. So give him an item of food. And again, even a minimal amount. It's not buying his house. You're not stealing his house. You're taking halachic rights. It's not even legal rights, because you're not making a star. It's halachic rights that you have a cheluk of his house. The Mishnah Berurah says, with the reason why it works, she'enei schiras vadayis ela bittul rishus sheheka ba'alma. Again, you're not exploiting the guy, you're not mistreating him, you're getting what you need, which to him is really meaningless. The Bialacha in Sif Aleph says that matana will not work unless it's a real matana, because there has to be some form of actual schiras rishus. The bigger chiddush, which is based on a Gemara in Erev and Daf Pei, that if the guy refuses, you could go to his wife, even though he's not happy with it. But says but Lamaisa, if the Goyish woman will consent, or anybody of the family, it's also good. Because you're not buying the house. You don't need the balabas. You need some form of connection to that house. And this is Taka Gepaskin in Shin Pei Beis Sif Yud Aleph. The Sharatzian says, Aloshin Lagabi this, Tayu V'zav and Zvini. It's not a regular kinyan, but it's a kinyan regarding this Chiras Re'uah. Again, the word Chiras Re'uah is the most helpful word for today. What exactly should you tell the guy when you make this ceremonial kinyan? So the Shulchan Aruch in Sif Dalet says, Ein sarach lefarish lei shehula heta tiltum. Don't try to explain to him we want to carry, because he's just going to get concerned. He's not going to know what's happening. You basically, I think the right nusach is you take your nice few dollars, give him a nice, it may have to be a mensch. I am renting the rights to your apartment that I need for religious purposes. He doesn't have to understand the whole oimik of the sugya, and you're not fooling him. It's not gezalakim chas v'shalom. The Chayodim in Ayin Hey Zayin says, Sarach sheyoyma haskeli rishuscha. I need rights to your apartment so I could carry my apartment. And you could certainly promise him that he's not going to lose, not going to cost him anything, he's not giving up anything. It's basically he's keeping his, but now I have a right to carry in my house or our common yard. No, it's not to have the keys. It's not taking his bailus. You don't need the keys at all. And again, don't be afraid to be honest, because honesty is the best way to do things. You're not taking it, you're not buying it, you're basically taking a bittul rishus that now you have a shaykhis. Now this to me was very interesting, but I think I can explain it. Mitzad echad, the guy is not part of Hilchas Eruvin, so you can make an Eruv and totally ignore him. The Chazal made it very difficult for us to coexist with the guy, and therefore he's not part of the Eruv, and you have to make Schiras Rishus. But when it came to Schiras Rishus, it has unprecedented kulas. Less than a Shavapruta, even on Shabbos, no star, Tal Yuv Zavin, you could use his wife, we'll soon see Schira Lekitoi. So it seems the two extremes. Mitzad Echad, Chazal made it difficult. Mitzad Sheni, the Schiras is the easiest thing in the world. Because the point is, we try to discourage it. If it can't, if it has to be the way it is, then make it easier. As long as you got the message that we try to maintain our nitzchiyas, the Abdul Eschem in Ha'amim, that's the secret of Netzach Yisrael, Lo Yishaker. Now, in an apartment building, let's say you have 50 families. Does every yid have to go to the guy and say, "Could I be soicha your rishus?" So now that you understand a little the makings of the sugya, it's pashut avad not. As long as the guy was mevatel rishus to even one of the yidden, that's enough. And that's why it says beferish in Sif Tes of our Simin that one yid that makes chirishus with the guy is enough. You don't have to have all the yidden marching into the guy's house. If you have a few goyim taka, you have to get chirishus from each one of them. It's not a stira. We want to get everybody on board for this Eruv Chatzeros. Now, you don't have to tell the guy, I am a representative of all the people in the apartment building, you're going to scare him unnecessarily. You don't have to do that. As long as you, one yid, has rights to his apartment, that has solved the problem that we are facing. Okay, we're going to get to that. Okay. Hopefully we get to that at the end. Now, Lamaisa, the question that comes up quite often, you made an Eruv Chatzeros in the apartment building, and one yid moved out, and then another yid moved in. He was not there when you made the original Schiras Rishus. Do you have to do it over again? And the answer is absolutely not. Think about it, it's pashut. The guy gave up his bailas, he's still living there. Why should a new yid require a new Schiras Rishus? He didn't give it to the guy, the yid that left. You don't have to buy it, you don't have to have part of it, as long as he relinquished his bailas, part of his bailas, and it's still in existence. So the fact that Yid was not there b'shas Schiras Rishus has absolutely no bearing on the sugya. Now, a challenging question, I should say a very beautiful question, because it's in Hegeya, but it really brings us to the shenkite of the sugya. Let us now go back to one of the questions we began with. The Yidden in the Bung County, for example, made a wonderful Tzuras HaPesach, Eruv Chatzeros. They forgot to make a cheshm with the guy. So, let's assume they remembered on Friday. So you're wondering, what's the problem? Go Friday, give the guy a few dollars, say, can we rent your rishus? And now, retroactively, the Eruv was chal. What's wrong? You made a nice Eruv, you had a problem that you forgot the guy, so include him, and then you go back to the Eruv, right? Or maybe, since when you made the Eruv Chatzeros with all the Yidden, there was a guy, and he prevented the Eruv from working. Maybe you have to do it all over again. Maybe it's not chal when there was a guy that wasn't included. And if you want to be very technical, the Gemara's lashon in Eruv and Samach Beis that we learned earlier, ein Eruv moel b'makom akum. So if you went through all the motions to make an Eruv Chatzeros, but it was ineffective because there was a guy living there. In other words, maybe you have to go in the right order. First Schiras Rishus, and then you have to make an Eruv Chatzeros. If you don't follow that order, it's invalid. Or you might say, what should be the svar in that? If all the Yidden join and make an Eruv Chatzeros, that's good. How does Eruv Chatzeros work, by the way? If you have 50 families that share one hallway or one bungalow on the lawn, you have to make it one family. Eruv means we mix. So what's wrong if we first mix? Now we're 50 families is one family. We have a problem, so solve the problem. Why is it a psul in the Eruv? It's a problem. So if you have a problem, you solve it. So this question is a wonderful question, and the Biur Halacha in Sif Aleph discusses this. And he says, Taka from the Lashon HaGemara, Ein Erev Moyel B'Mokum Akum, would seem to indicate that you first have to make the Schiris and then the Erev. But then he points to a Gemara Daf Samach Vav that seems to say you could first make the Erev and then Soicha Rishus. And then he quotes some Rishonim say Fakert. So Bialacha says a beautiful pshat. He says in Svara there's nothing wrong with first making the Erev, making all Yidden one, and then solving the problem of the non-Jewish participant. So why should there be a svara that you have to first make the Schiris Rishus? Zog to Bialacha golden avar. Because if you make the Eruv Chatzeros, the meaning is you make a bracha. You can't make a bracha at that point because the Eruv is not yet effective. Because the guy was not reckoned with. And Zog to Bialacha also, the guy might say no. So then you made a bracha levatala. But you can't make a bracha on an Eruv that's really ineffective. So really, mitzad the Erev, you can make the Erev, and then you can make Schiris Rishus. The problem is only regarding the bracha. So therefore, both the Yukim are right. Mitzad the Erev, you can make any order. But Lamaisa Ein Erev Moy is not going to work yet. If it doesn't work yet, you can't make a bracha. So I won't make a bracha, but we know the Marshal's famous Lashon in the Chuvas, to do a mitzvah without a bracha is an Avon Gadol, so why do that? Now, I saw in a Sefer Chachmas Leiv, one of the Heintig on Hilchazerv and Amid Kufla Amid Ches is, like this Bialacha, it would come out that in a situation you're not making a bracha, then Taka you can make the Erev first, and then you could make the Schiris Rishus. But also I want to mention, in the previous case that we mentioned, of the bungalow colony, where they already made the Erev and already made the bracha, so you don't have to do it over again. What you have to do now is go to the guy, make a Schiris Rishus, and the Erev, what you did originally was still kosher. Now, another question that I saw in that Sefer Chachmas Alev, Amid Kuf Lamed Zayin discusses, how about the other question? You first made a Tzuras HaPesach around the whole bungalow colony, strings and whatever you use, and then you made Schiris Rishus from the guy. Is there any reason that the Schiris Rishus to go first, and then the Tzuras HaPesach? So he says, what should be a Havamina? That there's an order. It's two independent concepts. One is making it one rishus in physically, and then you have to work with the fact the guy is there. He does quote a Rivash in Tav Chav Zayin that both the Das Torah and Siv Daled and the Kavachaim Siv Kot and Tes are medayik from the Rivash that first you have to have Schiris Rishus and then you have to have Tzuras HaPesach. But he shows conclusively that that's really a misreading of the Rivash. The Rivash does not mean to say that it's possible. You'll see the lush, you'll see it's very much meduik like he says, and he said Rabbi Yashav agreed to him, that even though the Das Torah and the Kavachayim were machmir, but mitzad asvara, it definitely makes sense that you can make the Tzuras HaPesach, the string, stick, Erev first, and then afterwards you can make a Netilas Rishus. The point is that it's really two independent procedures. Why should there be an order that's ma'akiv? I'll tell you where there might be an order that's ma'akiv, which we can understand it. And that is if you buy a used pot from a non-Jew. So in Shulchan Aruch, there's a sheet of many Rishonim. Before you toivel it, you have to kasher it. That's a svara. Because toiveling is bringing in the Kedushas Yisrael. But if it's still treif, it's lacking Kedushas Yisrael. That we understand there has to be an order. But in this case, why should there be an order necessarily? It doesn't seem to have any svara why this has to go before or after the Schiras Rishus. Let's say you have a bungalow colony or you have a apartment building and you want to make a Schiras Rishus. And it's not so difficult. You give the guy a token payment and you take bailus. For how long does this work? Can you do it indefinitely for the rest of your life? Is there a timeline? Does it get expire after a while? And the truth is, the Beis Yosef records the minig that every Erev Shabbos they would make another Schiras Rishus. Zok the Beis Yosef, it's not necessary. You could do it once for many years. Why you do it every Erev Shabbos? So the Beis Yosef is very mistava vart to make it difficult. You have to do it every single week. You say, this is difficult. Let's get Jewish tenants in the future. So it's basically part of the original objective to try to keep us va'avdol eschem. But Lamaisa, the Beis Yosef does say clearly that if you make it indefinitely, it works. Kol zman, as long as the guy does not retract from his chiras, the Schiras Rishus is in effect. The question is, so if it does work indefinitely, is there any time limit? Could it work forever? So the emes is that it really doesn't expire. The Eruv Chatzeros that we put down a matzah, I should mention, could last a year or two, but after a while it gets wormy or it gets, inedible. You have to keep on refreshing it, so to speak. But this Schiras Rishus, you're not putting down a matzah or something. It doesn't get stale, infested by bugs. Theoretically, it could work forever. In Shin Pei Beis, Siv Zayin, the Shulchan Aruch says that if you made it for 10 years, and after 10 years it expires, you have to do it over again. If you make it forever, it never expires. The Mishnah Berurah says Pashut, that if it expired, you have to make a new one. The guy can say, let's just keep it. You have to make a new Schiras Rishus. But that's only when you limited it originally. But if you make it forever, l'chayr, it's Pashut that it works. In fact, I saw one of the Gedolei HaPoskim, the Beis Shloimeh, Siman Nun Aleph, he says that really making it a longer time is better than just making it stam without a time. Why? He says, let's say you make it stam. I'm renting your Rishus. It could be it's only for one Shabbos. More so, if you make it stam, like we say, I'm just renting your Rishus without making a time limit, what happens when the guy moves out, another guy moves in? So you can't say that the first guy made it for the second guy. So then you have to do it over again. So his lashon is Golui l'chol yedei seifa shebeli zman katz. If you don't make a time, yesh kama ikuli upshuri. There are many problems. First of all, it might be only 1 week. It might, if the guy moves out, you have a problem with the new guy. But he says, if you make it, let's say for 20 years, and that's the number he uses, then it's good for 20 years. And we'll soon see this, the Poskim say this, the Poskim say this, if you made it with guy number one for 20 years, and then he sold the house to a different guy, believe it or not, it's still effective. Because the second guy can only buy from the first guy what the first guy owns. And he gave he only owns the house without a little bit rishus. He gave it to the Yid. The Mamacha Rishon L'Sheni, he can only sell to the second guy what he owns. Oh, so it depends on the upmach. But if he Taka gave rishus for 20 years, and he gives it over to the second guy the way it is, he doesn't have more. So many poskim hold is good. So the Beis Shloimeh, that's the Beis Shloimeh probably also means to imply, if you make it without a time limit, it could be only 1 week, and you get problems with future people that are taking over the house. So basically we see 3 Yesodis. If you do it stam without a time, it's problematic. You could do it for a longer time. But whenever the time you do it, if it expires, if you say 20 years, it's 20 years. How long can you actually make it as long as you want? So this is interesting. The Bach and the Chadosh is the end of Siman Daled. It seems to imply they made it for 50 years. 50 years is a long time. The Beis Shloimeh says, I'm not so happy with 50 years. That makes it a chucha v'tlula, like a joke. I'm really not so sure what he means, a chucha v'tlula, because, the whole thing, I wouldn't say it's a joke, but the whole thing is a schiras re'uah. Less than Shabbat Pruta, on Shabbos, no star, Talyu v'zavin. So if all that doesn't bother us, why all of a sudden making it 50 years is such a problem? But the Beis Shloimeh says he doesn't like 50 years, so he says make it for 20 years. He says because 20 is a lot less than 50. The Chacham Tzvi in the famous Tshuva Siman Vav has a problem for 50 years for a different reason, because you're not dealing with the Balabas himself, you're dealing with the Balabas's worker. So he's a Breit Mechut, and he gives you the Balabas's house for 50 years. Maybe the Balabas is not happy. So it seems that if you deal with the Balabas directly, you could even do 50 years. So Lamaisa the Mishnah Berurah, and this is one of the few places the Mishnah Berurah quotes the Beis Shloimeh, the scholar of, and Mishnah Berurah Sivkat Mem Ches, he writes, Hiskimu harbe achrayim diachalas lisker al zman oruch rav, you could even do 50 years. Ach lechatchila toiv shaloi lisker rak ad esrim shana. And in the Sharatzian quotes this Beis Shloimeh. So Lamaisa, again, if you did it forever, it works. No one holds it doesn't work. But it's good to make it. Mishnah Berurah quotes the Beis Shloimeh for 20 years. I should mention, if you take and make it, whatever years you make it, 10 or 20 years, mark it down in the place that you remember to see it. Because you make it 20 years and you forget about it, 20 years comes and then it sort of self-destructs. So maybe put it the same place you write down when the last time you checked your mezuzahs. You have to do it twice in 7 years. Hopefully you have that in a place that you see it occasionally. So you'll be constantly in contact how long you have yet until this schirus just becomes invalid. It also makes sense that if you're dealing with the Bailam directly, you can make it even longer than 20 years, at least according to the Chacham Tzvi. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the question is that when you made a schirus with one guy, and then the guy changed to sell to a different guy, the halacha is that the schirus is still good. I said it's not in Shulchan Aruch, I'm sorry, it is in Shulchan Aruch Sif Ches. And the Mishnah Berurah says, because Lamaisa, the first guy only owns the house minus the schirus, and when he sold it to the second guy, he's selling the house minus the schirus. So it is actually beferish and mechab. I'm sorry, I said it earlier differently, but the mechab is beferish. The second guy only buys the house with the schirus or shus in place until the end of 20 years. Question, listen to a beautiful ha'ara. Let's say you have a 3-family home. Right now there's one yid and one guy living there, no eruv, no participation of the guy required. Now a yid moves in and pays to the Goyish landlord a nice hefty $1,500 a month rent. Now all of a sudden we have a problem because you have to make an eruv. You have 2 families, and one guy, right? Oh. But let me tell you a very nice svar. If you have 2 yid and one guy, and you give the guy a half a penny, so it's good, right? Schirus just is good. So now if the yid comes along and gives down $1,500 rent, why can that be schirus shus? So enechanami, you need it, but it comes with the schirus. Madach, less of a prut is good, kolsh gain rental. But the Mechab, the Ramah in Sif Aleph says beferish, when the yid pays for rent, he can't use it as schirus shus. The question is why? I think the answer is very pashut. The schirus is a solution to the problem. You have a chiyuv to make an eruv, but the guy can't be part of it. By giving him a schirus, you're getting his bailus. In this case, the schirus is making the problem. You're making the need for the eruv. You can't use the problem as a solution. And this is what I think the Rav Shulchan Aruch and Sif Beis means. He says, it can't work the imloikein la yikshe be'einav diras imoy v'la yetze misham. The schirus is supposed to be after you have a problem, it's a solution. But here the schirus of paying the rent is making the problem. The problem can't be a solution. There's another pshat which is also pashit, and that the Heilige Chazon Ish in Pei Beis Hey says, Chazon Ish says that the schir is supposed to get part of the Goyisha apartment. Here you're paying your rent for your apartment, so you're not really addressing the problem. So that both pshatim are true and both pshatim are emes. The Lamaisa, when a person pays rent, that's not schirus. He has to go after the rental and take a token schirus from the guy. If the guy refuses to take part of schirus, so this is a Gemara. It's very interesting. In Eruvin Samach Gimel and Medbeis, Gemara speaks about a certain person, Lachman bar Ristok. And Tosfos makes a point of saying, if you look in the Rach, it's Haman bar Ristak. And the Beragoyla and many poskim quote Haman. So it's interesting, it's almost Purim. And Haman, where did he come to a nice Jewish boy with the name Haman? But the Torah says it's Pashut, it wasn't the Yid. This Haman bar Ristak was a guy. And he refused to take part in the Eruv. So what's the Eitzah? So the Gemara says, and Daf Samach Gimel, Zilu batilu reshusaychu l'gabi chad. Go try to have one of the Yidden give over his reshus to the other Yid. So now it's one Yid and one guy. You have a problem. It's like tomorrow, no, it doesn't work. Schir b'telas reshus does not work. You can't make 2 Yidden into one and then it's only one, and one doesn't work by a guy. So what's the Eitzah? So Zok the Gemara in Eruvin of Samach Dalid. The Eitzah is go over to the guy, this Haman, and ask him to hold one of your items. Now you have rights to his apartment, to hold an item. Somehow get rights to use his apartment. And the Gemara says, Now, since you have a right to keep your item in the Goyish apartment, you have rights to his apartment. And you are like Schirel Lekitoi. And this, Rabbi say, is used in many situations when the guy does not want to cooperate, or maybe when there's too many goyim to go to each and get a Schiris Rishus. There's something called a Schirel Lekitoi, which basically means if you could go to a worker that works for all the goyim, or works for the entire apartment building, and you get the reshus from him, that he represents all the goyim. So instead of going to each individual guy, you go to a representative of the guy, the schire lekitei. Rashi says schire means a full-time worker. Lekitei means he cuts the crops. But basically, a schire lekitei, and the Shulchan Aruch and Yud Aleph says, is like an ishtay. Aval me ishtay, a schire lekitei, you're allowed to take a schiris, even though the guy refused to cooperate. So here we see an eitzah that might be much more practical. Instead of going to each guy, go to schira lekitai, and then you have rights to all the apartments. Zok the Mishnah, how does one worker give away so many rishuyos? The same you say, this is really a schiras re'ua. You don't really need it. It's good enough if you go to his representative, his worker, and he could do it for all the Goyish tenants. The Bialacha quotes in Atzi al-Moigim that the Schir Lekiti has to have rights in the apartment, which very often a worker keeps some of his tools or something in the apartment. So this is known as the Schir Lekiti. Once you locate, we'll soon see if the superintendent is a good idea, but once you locate a Schir Lekiti, go straight to him and make a Schir Shus with him, the same way you did it with the guy. Listen to a beautiful ha'ara. You could have, and this grad comes up quite often, you have a guy that owns an apartment building. There are Yiddish and Goyish tenants. You have to make an Eruv, and you have to get a Schira Lekitei. The Goyish landlord has a Yiddish building manager who has rights to all the apartments. So it's a wonderful idea. You have a Yiddish Schira Lekitei. Go straight to him and work out a Schira Shus, right? Or let's be a little more aggressive. Once the Yid is a Schira Lekitoi, you don't have to even make a Schira Shus, because he's part of the Eruv. So the question is, how does Schira Lekitoi work? Does it work that he is like the Bailam in all the apartments, then he's included in the Eruv, the Matzah. If he's a representative of the guy, so he's not better than the guy. You have to make Schira Shus. So Re'ez Apel, and see if Yud Beis, there's a machlokes 2 days in Shulchan Aruch. If Schira Lekitei works automatically, or you have to make a Schira Shus. And the Svara in the machlokes, like I told you, if you learn Schira Lekitei is like the Bailim, he is a new Bailim, he's Mr. Owner, so then if he's a Yid, it works automatically. He's part of the Baksa Matzah. But if he works as a representative of the guy, he's not better than the guy. And there are 2 days in Shulchan Aruch and the Mechaba. In fact, the Shulchan Aruch says, Lechatchila, Mr. Burr quotes Lechatchila, and Sivkat Memalef, Nachain Lachash L'Svara Rishayim. So if you do find a Yiddish representative, let's say the building manager, and he has rights to the apartments, go to him and say, I'd like you to be a representative for all the Goyim. I'm going to give you a token payment. I want to be Soich Rishus of all the Fraya and the Goyish people. And then you have a wonderful Eruv Chatzeros. Last but not least, a tricky question is, who's considered a Schira Lekitei? So the most popular question in Chazerivin is, what we used to have a superintendent, and then became called a super, a janitor, a building manager, whatever it is a superintendent a valid Schira Lekitei for all the workers? In other words, since he's cleaning the halls and taking out the garbage and doing all the work for all the tenants, and before the holidays he reminds you he's working for you, so maybe that's a Schira Lekitei for all the tenants. So you have a simple so go to him, rent the rishus of all the goyim and fraya, and then you can make a regular Eruv Chatzeros. And I've heard people say this, that the superintendent is a Schira Lekitei of all the tenants. The problem is that reality is who is hiring, who's paying, and who could fire the superintendent? Only the landlord. So he is working for somebody, but not for the tenant, he's working for the landlord. And as early as the Divrei Malkiel in the Ashmatas Techela Gimel Simon Yud Aleph, he says what people are that make a schirshus with the strois, which is presumably is the worker, is wrong. He says because the strois, which I think is somewhat of a super, is working for the balabas, not for the goyish tenants. The Marsham in Chelikei Simon Lamed has an idea you could rent schirus shus from the Misharsis. Zok the Marsham, it's not true. The landlord hires the Misharsis to clean up the apartment. It's not the tenants of the apartment building, it's the landlord. So the Marsham does it. If each tenant gives part of the payment to the superintendent, okay, then he's working for each one. But if it's a regular scenario that the landlord is paying for the superintendent, he's a worker for the landlord, not for the tenants. And that's why I think there's a problem with going straight to the superintendent or the building manager or the janitor, whatever you want to call him, but he's really working for the balabas. There could be a different knech, and I think this might have some truth to it. Why is a landlord spending all that money having a full-time worker in the apartment building and he's probably not even living there? The answer is basically he has to satisfy the tenants. Part of the rental that every tenant pays is to help pay for this worker. So why don't we say that each tenant pays part of the rent to maintain the building, and the balabas is like hiring the superintendent for all the tenants. I mean, the truth is that's really the way it works. I saw that Chachmas Alev, he says it's something like a schir l'schir. You're telling the landlord to hire a worker for me. Now, it's really not actually that, but definitely we could say that it could work because at the end of the day, he's working for each tenant individually. Now, Lamaisa, there's a different approach, and that is if the janitor, the superintendent, has rights to keep his klei avadasai, he keeps the mops and the brooms in the common hall, that means he's keeping his stuff in our hall, because the hall belongs to all the tenants. I mean, we have rights to all the tenants. So maybe it's like he's keeping stuff in our apartment, in all the apartments. I go straight to him. He's representing all the tenants. Rabbi Menashe Klein in the Chuvas in Chelik Daled Nun Tes, someone wrote him that the Pupa Rav Zechayim Levracha held you could go straight to the superintendent, and he says, I can't argue the Pupa Rav, but I think it's a mistake, because the superintendent is working for the balabas, not for the tenants. Mamish this time. But Rabbi Menashe Klein himself in Simon Nun Tes and Simon Samach develops the concept that you could make a serious ashus with the balabas. Because the balabas has rights in every apartment. The balabas keeps items of his in every apartment. So he has rights in every apartment. If you go straight to the balabas, that might be the eitzah. So I would just recommend when someone has a need for an Eruv, an apartment building, a bungalow colony where there's a guy, consult with a Meir Hayra. Sometimes you could use the superintendent when you pay him directly. Sometimes you could use the balabas. Whatever you do it right. You're talking about doing it for 20 or more years, do it right. And last but not least, let me tell you a beautiful aura. I saw this from the Brisker Rav. He once ended up someplace for Shabbos, I think it was in Switzerland, and there was a goyish person on the premise that he had to make a schiras shus. So the Brisker Rav had an idea. He says, please hold my umbrella in your house over Shabbos. The guy was very honored to accommodate the Brisker Rav, and then he's allowed to carry. So he Maifis, the Brisker Rav had a gewaltige Einfall. The truth is not the Brisker Rav's Maifis, not the Brisker Rav's Chiddush, it's the Beferish Gemara that we mentioned. Let him hold your item. The Maifis is the Brisker Rav knew the Gemara and applied it. but basically, this is the Eitzah. You'd have the guy hold something for you, and then he's like working for you. Have part of his rishus. The Beis Yosef says, if you tell him to hold it, even though he puts it into one makom, but you have rights, he can move it from place to place. But this is an eitzah. Now, Lamais, you're not going to give your goyish neighbor, if you have a 3-family house, to hold your umbrella. But I saw in that Sefer Chachmas Lev as a gewaltige eitzah. Knock on the guy's door and say, I would be very comfortable if you would have the key to my apartment, just in case something happens. If I need access, you need access. please hold my key indefinitely. Then you have a right to his apartment. Now, I wondered, that's a great idea because it's based the Gemara, it's like the Brisker Rav, but the guy is holding your key, you're not very comfortable with that Eitzah. So have a simple Eitzah, give him the wrong key. As long as he has a key, it's okay. As long as he's holding your item. It's not working because Lamaisa, he has rights to your apartment. That's not the way it works. Fakir, you need rights to his apartment. He's holding an item. This is rather the answer to your question. When you have a city Eruv, which is a different share, which is not for now, but where do you go to every single guy? So there's some aids you go to the government officials, which is not so pashut because they have no rights to your apartment. You know, we have the Third Amendment, they can't station soldiers in your apartment. Some have a murdik echab because the water meters is in every single, or water meters, electric meters is in every single home. So you go to either electric company or you go to the government that has the water meters. They have part of their item is in your house. But that's really a share for itself. But basically, here's the sugya. Make sure it's done right. I will talk to you all.
Shem Egan Shir, like to give a big yashikach to Smith for today's shir. Like to give a big yashikach to Simcha Cohen for support of today's shir. Lili Nishmas Oviv. Rabbi Yitzchak ben Rishola Kohen of Shalom. We would like to have the great schos sponsoring a share. Call Ergen Shir Torah 718-851-8651. Rabbi Smith will say a sekum of the share in about 5 minutes. Chananya ben Akashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakis Yisrael Figure Hebron Torah Mitzvah Shenem Adonai Hofetz Aman Tzidkoi Yagdol Torah B'Yad.
If you don't mind, okay. You sure? Go. Okay.
But if a yid moves out, you do have to make kinur. It's only if a goy moves out. No, a yid.
As long as you say for the shus. It's different. No, that's Eruv.
Everybody, so everyone here is in one Eruv, one Rishus, and we'll hear the Sikkim from Rabbi Smith on today's shir. Just take a few minutes. Shh.
Are they working? Okay. Just a short summary, learn today Bez Hashem. First of all, it's important to learn halacha, know all the halachas, and basically when there's a non-Jew or a irreligious Jew on the premises, in the area, in the bungalow colony, in the apartment building, in a 3-family house, he's really not required to be part of the Eruv, but as a deterrent, Chazal said you have to do something, just to get him as part of the Eruv. But one Yid and one Guy is, you go back to the original halacha l'maisa, nothing is required. An hotel that only one Yid is there and all Goyim really does not need any Eruv whatsoever. If a Guy has a store, but he's not living on the premises, the fact that he eats lunch there, he's as if he's not there. If a Guy buys a room or a house for Pesach, again, does not require an Eruv because he's not living there. A maid that's living in someone's house, but it's not an independent apartment that she has exclusive rights to, or even if she has rights, if she's eating together with the family, she does not complicate matters at all because it's as if it's part of the family. When you have a situation where a Guy is living with 2 Yidden or more, then we have this interesting combination. Mi'ikir you don't need anything. Mid'Rabbanan, you need a schiras re'ua to send the message that this is not ideal. Try to find other accommodations. But if it's necessary, when you have 2 Yidden and 1 Guy, you need a minimal schiras re'ua, token hiring of the Guy's property. An apartment building where you have Yidden and Goyim, in a hotel when there's more than 1 Yid and there's some Goyim. And the truth is, even today, where Lamaisa, we are living Bein Ha'akim, and anyhow it's happening, but we'll still, like the Chaim Sofer says, we stay with the original halacha, that we don't change, we try to keep this halacha of Schiras Rishus. The aside of Schiras Rishus, you're not buying his property, you're not stealing from him, Chas v'shalom, there's no gezalakim going on. It's basically a token right that you have a shaykhis to his apartment. Even less than a Shavapruta works, even on Shabbos when there's no kinyanim it works, even Tal Yu V'Zavin, you don't need a star. All you have to have is some type of rights to his apartment. If a Yid moved in after the Schiras Rishus, it's fine. There's no problem with that because as long as you have the Goyish Rishus, it's fine. If only 1 Yid has to make Schiras Rishus with the Goy, you don't have to have all the Yidden. You could do it after the Eruv Chatzeros was made. The only problem is as far as the bracha, but if you want to make a bracha, of course you should make the Schiras and then the Eruv. The order of Tzuras HaPesach and Schiras, there really is no order. Any order is good. You could make the Schiras Rishus forever. The minig is to make it for 20 years, okay, but more than that is also okay, but the minig is to make it for 20 years. You made a Schiras with the Goy and the Goy sold to a different Goy, the Schiras Rishus is still in effect. A second Yid rents the apartment, and now we have 2 Yid and a Goy, that does not count as the Schiras Rishus, because that's the problem, not the solution. Well, like the Chazanish, you have to get part of the Goyish apartment. If the guy refuses to participate in the Schiras Rishus, you could use his wife or child, or Schirei Lekitai, like we said, his worker, or permission to keep an item in his possession. A Jewish Schirei Lekitai, it's a machlaikas if you need Schiras Rishus, but the Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah Berurah is machri, you should have Schiras Rishus. If a superintendent is a good Schirei Lekitai, is questionable. If the landlord could be considered a Schirei Lekitai, is also questionable. So you have to know the mitzias of each particular case. But there is an eitzah, get permission to keep a item in the Goyish property, and that definitely works.